Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. So this is going to be a response to a great video I saw recently by Dave at The Dark Stuff over in the States. Do check out Dave if you haven't already. Great guy, great channel, been watching him for years. He did a thing on, he called it My Musical DNA. And he was talking about the fact that each cell in the human body has 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chromosomes are large strands of DNA which contain all the body's genes. So we've got 23 pairs of these things. So he was talking about his musical DNA in terms of 23 pairs of records, albums he was showing. And these are records which were in some way seminal to his development, and he was inviting people to share their own 23 pairs of records. Now I'm going to do this video, I'm going to take a different approach. I'm not going to do one video, I'm going to do 23 videos. So probably a misguided project, but this is the way I'm going to do it. Rather than looking at 23 pairs of albums, I'm going to look at 23 different years. And for each year, for each video, I'm going to talk about two records, or two singles rather, two songs. So 46 songs in total, making up what I consider to be my musical DNA. Now, it's not going to be perfect because it's not going to be complete. I've chosen a year to begin with, and I know there's music from before that year that was seminal to me in some way, but not so much to do with popular music. It was more to do with classical music, jazz, things I heard when I was very young. I'm just going to focus on, rock and pop, my musical DNA, and I'm going to start with a year that precedes my birth. So these years are not necessarily when I first heard the record. It will be in some cases I heard the song many years later, but I'll pick 23 years and just need to make sure for each of those years that there are two songs that were seminal to me in some way and which helped to constitute my musical DNA in Dave's terms. So the first year I'm going to look at in this first video is 1963, and the first song I'm going to talk about is not by the Beatles. Actually, it's by a different group, probably, well, almost certainly the biggest British band before the Beatles, and that was the Shadows. And the record I'm going to talk about was recorded on the 13th of December 1962, and it was released on the 31st of May 1963. I was checking the dates on this, and the Beatles were on the scene by then. Love Me Do had come out in October of 62, Please Please Me in March 63. So the Beatles were on the scene, and this band were probably just on the verge of starting to fade from history a little bit. But this record was in the collection of my paternal grandmother. She had this single in her collection. She had a small selection of records when I was growing up, some of which I didn't like, were not of interest to me, and some of which were absolutely brilliant and wonderful and which made a huge impact on me. This particular one, she played it to me one summer's afternoon. I'm fairly certain it was in 1975 that I heard this for the first time. This is Atlantis by the Shadows, which is a wonderful instrumental track composed by the British singer-songwriter and artist Jerry Lorden, who previously composed the Shadows' big hit Apache. He'd also done Wonderful Land as well. I was just looking him up actually. He had quite an interesting career. His songwriting career started in 1958, and he wrote for various other people, other artists, but he actually had 3 charting singles as a singer in 1960, and the most successful of those was Who Could Be Bluer, which was actually produced by George Martin. So that was a couple of years before the Beatles came on the scene. So Jerry Lorden, he had this knack for writing these very memorable tunes. Think of Apache is probably the most famous Shadows tune, very distinctive guitar. And Atlantis just has the most gorgeous guitar melody played by Hank Marvin on his Stratocaster. But it also has strings and female vocals. It's an incredibly evocative piece, and it just spun my head around. I remember, as a kid, just that thing when you listen to a record. There are some records that pass you by. They go onto the turntable, you listen to them, they don't make any impression at all. There are others that you like, but then there are others which you just become obsessed with. And this is a song or a track that I remember just obsessing over. So I just loved it so much that she actually gave me the record. Years later, I picked up another copy of it from a charity shop, I think, here in the UK. It's on the Columbia label, and actually, a couple of years after I got the single from my grandmother, she also bought me the Shadows 20 Golden Greats, and the song comes at the end of side 1 of this record. Not quite the same performance, I don't think. It sounds like a different take of it. nearly the same, but not quite the same. Anyway, so that record really takes me back in time to 1975, 76. I remember we moved house in 76 in the summer, and this is one of the records that I associate with that. Just a wonderful record, very magical sounding, great tune. Always makes me feel quite emotional when I hear it. I'm going to include it because, like I said, it's one of those very early tunes which I forged some kind of emotional connection with, and those are the ones which always, well, you know, the ones that tend to live on in your memory, I suppose. Same for this next one. So we are going to go to the Beatles now. So The Shadows was 31st of May 63, and I heard it in about 1975. The Beatles song I've chosen actually came from November 63, the 22nd of November 1963. And I would have heard this before the Shadows one. I would have heard this in round about 1974. I had, long-term viewers to my channel will know, I had an EP of Pinky and Perky, the Singing Pigs. And they had, on this record, on side one, there was She Loves You, this one, All My Loving, and Can't Buy Me Love. And I loved all three of them. I could have chosen any of those three, really. It would have to have been She Loves You or this one. I chose this one because I acquired this really nice EP a few years ago. All My Loving was not actually a single. It didn't come out as a single. It was famously the song which the Beatles performed when they did the Ed Sullivan Show, of course, and it had a huge cultural impact then, but it wasn't released as a single, but it did come out as an EP at some point after that. And I acquired this record from a friend of mine a few years ago who was getting rid of all his records and just wanted to get shot of them, so I got a few nice things from him, including this one. Now, All My Loving, of those three songs, She Loves You, All My Loving, and Can't Buy Me Love, All My Loving was the one that kind of had the most emotional resonance for me. It was a song which always made me kind of hanker after this feeling of love, you know, parental love, wanting to be at home with my parents and to be safe and secure. That verse, you know, close your eyes and I'll kiss you, tomorrow I'll miss you. I remember it being, you know, a slightly alarming song, this idea that the person you love is going to go away or disappear. And you know, I had a very stable and loving family background, and that song is one that really, I suppose it just really affected me. I remember years later my grandfather passed away in the mid-80s, and I went back and listened to the Pinky and Perky song again, All My Loving, and you know, it made me cry. It was a song which really powerfully evoked my earliest years, really. And it's just a song I've always loved it. I've loved the songcraft of it and the way that McCartney, it was one of the few songs that he ever did where he wrote the words first. Apparently he'd written the words, and the Beatles were on tour, I think in England in 63, and they arrived at a theatre somewhere, a provincial theatre. McCartney went backstage before the show, and there was a piano backstage, and he sat down with the words already completed, and he wrote the tune to the words. And it's a very simple song, or a deceptively simple song, as usual with McCartney. It has some very clever chord changes, has that kind of happy, sad quality to it, which went on to define my musical tastes. Still does, really, to be honest with you, that kind of strange hinterland between a happy sound and a sad sound. That is something which has always been with me, and I think All My Loving may well have been the first time I heard that. It was true also of Atlantis as well. It's the same kind of vibe, really, where you can't quite work out, is this happy, is this sad? But certainly one of the Beatles' greatest early songs. When I did my Beatles favourite songs video last year, I think it was, or maybe earlier this year, I had that quite high. So I'll go with that. All My Loving from 22nd of November 63, and of course we need to mention George Harrison's superb Nashville style guitar solo in there as well, which really adds something to the record, as George's guitar solos often did. So there we go, that is the first instalment in my series of 23 videos. So that was 1963, the Beatles and the Shadows. So no spoilers as to what the next year will be. I'm not even sure myself, actually. We'll have to choose carefully. So hope you enjoyed that video, and stay tuned for more to come. Take care. Bye.